Hi, I'm Colin at the Building Crafts College and we're going to be making a series of videos on various woodworking techniques. Now we're going to show you how to change a bandsaw blade. The first thing to do is to unwind the bandsaw blade, and I'm assuming here that you're replacing a blade the same size that you've taken out. So all the guides and the settings on the bandsaw are the same because it's the same size blade. Obviously, if you were changing to a smaller width or a larger width, you would have to change all those guides and settings. But what we'll show you is the principle behind that. So your bandsaw blade, unwrap it and literally just let it spring. Make sure that it springs the right way. What is critical to remember, it's very easy to unspring it the wrong way sometimes if you're not careful. And what is critical to remember, that the bandsaw cuts on a downward cut. So examine your teeth. If when you've unwound it, it's got a twist in it, then obviously that's not right. It's got to be concentrically circular. But the other thing to watch is if your teeth were upside down and you were looking at it, then it's unwound itself the wrong way around, and you need to invert it and twist it back so it is the right way. So that's the first thing to write. And we're lucky with this one, the teeth are the right way around. So the first thing to do, because we untensioned it, we know that these wheels are drawn together, so it should just be a question of putting it back. So slide it into the slot in your table. Hook it over the top of the wheel. Guide it in place to there. Just put your hand on the top of the wheel, make sure it stays in place, and then just hook it under the bottom edge of the bottom tyre and try and stop it from coming off. Doesn't always work. Sometimes you may need a friend to help you with this, but once you've got it set on. All bandsaw wheels these days are rubberized, so they have a rubber tie on them, and this generally has a crown or a camber on it, is what we call it. And your blade needs to be about centre on that camber, whatever the dimension of it is. So whatever the width, that's the general guide. The next thing that you need to get right, so position it top and bottom so it looks about visually even. Give it a bit of tension so it tightens up, and you can see this is fairly loose now. We will tension this up and you'll see it start to tighten. Okay? Tighten it up enough. I usually go about a third of the width, or third or halfway, depending on the size. So once you've got that tension kind of halfway, check that your guides are well set back. In this instance, because we're putting back a blade that the same size as the one came off, I don't need to check that, but I do need to check that it's running free here at the bottom set of the guide, that it's not caught up in anything. So once you've done that, the next thing to check is the tracking, and by the tracking I mean the balance of the wheel. It's important that wheels run parallel to each other. If they don't, if they tip forward or backwards at all, the bandsaw blade could run off the back or the front of the top wheel, and then obviously the blade would just come off. So you will find that as you do a manual run, as you do a manual spin, the blade will find its own balance. It doesn't matter if it wanders off the centre of the crown a bit, as long as it balances itself and doesn't wander in any direction. Once it's settled down, you will find that it will achieve its own position. So as I'm doing this, I can see that it has moved a little bit, but I'm checking it manually, so keep your fingers well away and just check that it is running. Now that is half tight and it's not going anywhere. I can see that that's running nice and smoothly. I also check down here where it is going against the guide. You have two types of guide on a bandsaw, a thrust wheel and these side guides, which make sure that the blade has got some support on its edges. The thrust wheel is to stop the blade moving back any further and to support the back edge as you're cutting. Two things about this one. The thrust wheel needs to be enough away so that as you cut into the wood, the blade is pushed against it. But it mustn't be, when the blade is free running, like this wheel should not be spinning, but when it's cutting, it should be spinning. If it's spinning when it's free running, then you haven't got it set right. And what can happen then is, because it's free running, spinning all the time, you'll get case hardening, and that's when a blade will break. And one way to notice that is the blade will start to jump backwards and forwards from the thrust wheel. So keep an eye out for that. Spin it, get that right. Don't adjust them to full setup to start with. Now you know you've got this going, take it to full tension. So in this instance, we know this is a 10mm blade. Remember that bandsaw blade guides are literally only a guide. So you have to use, it's a bit of experience, but that's pretty tight. Imagine you're setting up, tuning your guitar. Once you've done that, you've set it at high tension. Adjust these guides. Again, you don't want these pushing the blade one way or the other. The old craftsman's way of doing it was a cigarette paper's distance between the two guides. If you're a smoker, then that's fine. If you're not, just use your eye. It's a bit of an old craftsman's tale. So once you've set those up and these up, that's fine. Your thrust wheel's fine. A veneer thickness back, no more. That should be right. Your tension should be right. Just do one last visual manual check. Whenever you're setting any kind of tooling or cutter, always do a visual manual spin just to make sure nothing's contact with anything it shouldn't be, and that it sounds sweet running, and that does to me. So next, I now close the doors, lock it up, and whenever you change cutters on anything, it's your responsibility to make sure that it runs right for the next person. If you change a blade and then put a blade back in, because you're using different types of cutting blades, it's always your responsibility to check that it's safe for the next person. So the next thing you need to do is actually turn it on and listen to it free running. And that's how to change a bandsaw blade safely.